All right, welcome to the start of the series that I like to call Shark Lore. Everything you need to know about sharks in summary will be in this first episode of Shark Lore. This episode is the only outlier as it is the most important video to help you guide through the rest of the series. Those episodes will break down the specific families and orders of shark species in the hope that I analyze every single living species of shark by the end. Just be ready for it because there are about 529 reported species that I have found. So I mainly use Wikipedia, Fishbase, and IUCN for my sources. But with my street smart knowledge, I will try to make this as entertaining as I can for you all. I may not be an actual shark expert yet, but I do want to make sure this information is as close to perfect as I can get. No exaggerations or fictional stories are needed because the facts are more interesting than people realize. So feel free to berate me in the comments section if I do make a mistake, especially if I pronounce something wrong. But for the love of science, please don't tease me, guys. I worked really hard on this. This took a 1.5 year long journey of research and double-checking research. So just remember that there can be exceptions to a statement. With that being said, let's get on with the video. Okay, from now on, this is how the rest of the series will look like. I will be reading off of a Google Slide presentation, so bear with me on this. Feel free to take notes or just listen along for fun, starting now. Most of us are familiar with sharks. They're one of the most feared predators in the world because of the constant demonization of them in the media. Even predators like wolves are seen as cute because they look like household dogs, and fish in general are not the most flattering creatures to look at because sharks are indeed fish. It's very easy to target sharks because they are the apex predator of one of the most feared environments to be in, the ocean. Fearing something, however, usually just means that it's mysterious and misunderstood, and I've always been fascinated with wanting to discover mysteries because you'll no longer fear something that you know about. And sharks are possibly the most remarkable animals ever. Here's why. When going down the upside-down pyramid of life, their domain is Eukarya, and it's obvious that they are in the animal kingdom. They are in a phylum called the Chordata, which is what us humans are in, which is pretty much the phylum consists of vertebrates and a couple exceptions. It's in a class called the Chondrichthyes, which the roots of chon means cartilage, which is basically a flexible and less complex version of bone, and ichthy means fish. There are other cartilaginous fish, however, and those include the rays, skates, and ratfish, which are also called chimeras. The subclass Elasmobranchi helps divide the chimeras, and the superorder Coeluromorpha divides that into the sharks. What many don't realize is that this means sharks are technically boneless, because their cartilaginous skeleton does not fossilize like bones do, with it being about half as light as bone. Typically, bone marrow is what produces blood, but since sharks don't have bones, they will get their blood from the spleen, Leydig's organ, which is an esophagus covering connected to the immune system only found in Chondrichthyes, and epigonal organ, which is a protective layer that surrounds the ovaries or testes. Looking at the skeleton, you can see there's a skull and spine, with the fins being detached from it. It appears to have a rib cage, but that's actually the location of their gill slits. Since they're not protecting organs like lungs, it's not an actual rib cage, so that means if they wash up on shore, the air pressure could crush their own weight because of the weak skeleton. Even their teeth are made of calcified cartilage, or calcium phosphate is the material that they are made out of. Which is why when looking at shark fossils, people only ever find the teeth of the sharks. That's why I'm not going to analyze extinct sharks, because it gets a lot more complicated finding the correct information, especially when only analyzing the teeth can lead to major inaccuracies. That includes the megalodon. So I got your attention now, okay? I don't want to hear it. They are, beyond a reasonable doubt, extinct because there's not enough food for a cooler ocean with less available nurseries to allow them to grow a population. Case closed. Sharks, however, have been around longer than you think. not just the megalodon being alive around 23 million years ago, but sharks in general have been existing for about 450 million years. To put that into perspective, currently the earliest humans are only about 5 million years ago. Dinosaurs are about 240 million years old, and even trees are a meager 360 million years old. They have survived all 5 mass global extinctions, making them a resilient animal, literally. Their skin is made up of placoid scales called dermal denticles, and if that sounds like the word dentist to you, that's because their skin is actually made up of teeth. From experience of dissecting a shark in my zoology class senior year of high school, I can tell you that it's smooth from head to tail and feels like sandpaper from tail to head. It's actually quite hard to dissect it, even from the underside, because of how tough the skin is. The denticles are tightly packed together like chainmail on knight armor, so that it helps reduce drag when the shark swims. Even when wounded, the healing process can be fast, such as a bite mark healing in roughly 40 days. When looking at the anatomy a little closer, you may notice that just about every shark has 5 gill slits, with a couple species having 6 or 7 gill slits, but no more or less than that. It's not clear why some species have 6 to 7 gill slits, but my guess is that primitive sharks may have had a common ancestor with the lamprey that had 7 gill openings, and it just so happens that primitive sharks alive today are the ones with 6 or 7 gill slits. The gills are also a big factor in determining if an animal is a shark or a ray. What differentiates a shark from a ray is that sharks have their gills on the side near the cheek area, while rays have theirs on the underside near the throat. Sharks need to make sure that they can filter enough oxygen through the body to breathe and stay hydrated, especially for the types of sharks known as obligate ram ventilators. Think of it as a net underwater full of fish. You won't capture much fish when it doesn't move, but can scoop in much more when it's in motion. The thing about this statement is people believe all sharks are like this, but only about 24 species actually need to move to stay alive. Those include hammerhead sharks, whale sharks, and mackerel sharks like great whites. They just so happen to be the most popular types of sharks, which is why people think all sharks are like this. The other 500 or so species can gulp water with a technique called buccal pumping. They're able to suck in water through their mouths, and some benthic species that bury under the sand may also have spiracles on the top of their head as a backup for breathing, allowing the water to release through the spiracles. So that's what that little hole is on the right picture. Their kidneys go through a deal called osmosis, which means that salt must travel through the kidney to prevent osmotic pressure, so that the kidneys do not literally explode if it's in fresh water for too long. There are, however, some species that can spend a great deal of time in fresh water by having strong kidneys blocking off urea to only release fresh water through urination, while the rectal gland tries to hold in the salt for balance. Their circulatory system is closed, which means that blood never leaves the vessels and travels through one loop carrying nutrients around the whole body in a 2-chambered heart. So not a lot is going on in the circulatory system. So moving on to the coloration, why is it that sharks are usually gray on the top half and white on the bottom? Well, it does have a purpose, and it's called countershading. It's a form of camouflage based on looking at the animal from above or below. From above, you're looking into the darkness of the ocean, so the top half blends in with the bottom of the ocean. And if you're looking from below, you're looking at the bright sun, so the white underside blends with the sky. Even the divide between the colors is called the lateral line, and it has a purpose, which is to detect pressure and vibrations from the surrounding water, which in a way is a sixth sense. The pores on the lateral line have tiny hairs that detect low-frequency vibrations similar to why cats have whiskers. It's how a shark is able to be alert of something a mile away. Some deepwater shark species can actually glow in the dark through processes of either biofluorescence or bioluminescence. The difference being that biofluorescence is when they reflect glowing light from a different source, such as black light or a flashlight, while bioluminescence has the animal itself produce the glow. The glow can be good or bad depending on what it attracts, because it can attract prey and mates, but it could also attract predators. It could sometimes even scare away predators if it glows on an area such as the spine to signal that they are poisonous. Some species may glow an even brighter color, which is known as counter-illumination, to blend in with the brighter ocean surface by essentially hiding their shadow. Sometimes there are cases of sharks having a lack of melanin, which means they become albino, and it becomes a problem for hunting since prey from above can easily notice the shark. It's especially not great because many sharks try to sneak up on their prey from below. You can see that albinism can show other genetic defects, such as having one eye, or incomplete colors like having less gray on them. It may look pretty, but losing the ability to sneak up on prey may cause a risk of them starving and dying a lot sooner. When looking at the behavior of sharks, we see that sharks are extremely cautious of approaching anything in order to not waste energy. Sharks are thought to attack anything that moves, but most of them swim away from the sight of bubbles. They usually circle around the item before ever getting close. A common practice they use is the bite and spit technique, where a shark quickly bites a large animal, then swims away and waits around an hour or so to let them bleed out before going in for an attack. This makes sure the shark minimizes getting hurt from a healthy prey item that's able to fight back, which makes sense because their purpose is to eat the wounded and sick animals so that the ocean remains clean, and their tough bodies rarely make them sick. If they do end up swallowing something inedible such as bones or plants, they do a deal known as gastric eversion, which is throwing up their stomach to regurgitate the unwanted parts. Like many predators, sharks try to sneak up on prey from below or behind, so that it's out of the periphery of the prey item, and doesn't have time to react when the shark does get too close. So if you encounter a shark in the water, always try to make eye contact with them, because they never want to attack something that knows that they are there. If they feel threatened, they may hunch their back and depress their pectoral fins to show that they are upset. They may also do a sudden shake similar to how horses may shake off flies. If a shark does get too close, you could try to punch their sensitive noses, except you can't really punch underwater, so the best idea is to poke the eye, nose, or gills. And they usually don't latch onto you for too long anyways, because they realize you're not good food. Also, try not to wear anything shiny, similar to the reflective shine on the scales of fish, so something like silver would especially not be ideal. Even having pale skin, such as me, can increase the likelihood, but eye contact should be enough to make them leave you alone. Sharks are also curious about electronics because of their electroreception, so that's why you'll often see sharks booping their snoots on cameras, and seem to almost avoid touching the divers when doing so, because they only care about the camera. Some sharks will also use this adorable little thing called spy hopping, which means they poke their head out of the water to see the surroundings on the surface for curiosity. It's so far only been observed in great whites and broadnose sevengills, but likely occurs with other species that hunt for prey items above the water, such as birds. But speaking of tasty birds, sharks have taste buds so strong that they can detect fattiness, such as the blubber on seals, although only large enough carnivorous sharks actually eat seals. So our mussels wouldn't taste good anyways because there's not a lot of fat in them, especially since we rarely encounter sharks anyways. The taste buds are located throughout the mouth lining instead of the tongue on the sharks, and since humans aren't that tasty, the truth is that just about every reported death from a shark attack was due to blood loss, and not the shark actually eating the person. Often the reason for the attack is if they feel threatened or are being territorial. You might have seen a bad shark movie where the person gets swallowed whole, and you might have even seen the shark roar when it attacks someone, which is absolutely ridiculous because not only do sharks try to sneak up on prey, but sharks don't even have vocal cords to produce sound because they have no need to make noise in the water. Only marine mammals like whales and seals can make sounds in the ocean. And what about their ears? Because it doesn't look like they have any, but they do in fact have tiny ear holes behind their eyes that only listen to low frequency vibrations, but they'd much rather use their seventh sense. The spots on the nose are from an organ called the ampullae of Lorenzini. Inside the pores are jelly-filled cones. Jelly-filled cones used to amplify low-frequency vibrations in the water. This unique sense is known as electroreception, which helps detect electric fields from slight movements. This allows the shark to know how big a fish is, how fast it is, and even if it's injured without needing to see it. This can be really helpful for sharks in murky water that makes it difficult for them to see. Unfortunately, sharks are very sensitive to loud noises, so sharks do their best to stay away from human activity, and makes it very difficult to find sharks in the wild. This isn't even mentioning their incredible sense of smell that is able to detect a drop of blood in a swimming pool. Except, keep in mind how smell really works. A smell is spread out in particles, so for a shark to smell blood from a mile away, blood particles have to travel a mile away to reach the shark's nose. It cannot just teleport. Even if, if the water is calm, the particles won't travel very far unless there's a current that carries the particles all the way to the shark's nose. Even then, sharks will not go into feeding frenzy mode just from the smell of blood. They are very cautious predators, and they will likely try to detect if that smell is from their common prey item before doing anything. Their eyes are also quite incredible as they have a similar structure to the human eye, having the cornea, lens, iris, and pupil that can dilate based on light just like humans, and most fish don't even have dilated pupils. But in fact, their eyes are even better because, like a cat's eye, they have a tapetum lucidum that allows light to bounce off twice and make the eyes glow at night, so in a way they have night vision. They also have rods and cones, or duplex retina, so they can see color, but it's unclear what their perception of color looks like with them living in the blue ocean. Sharks have another unique thing that no other fish has, and that is eyelids. They're called nictitating membranes and protect the shark's eye when feeding on prey that may try to poke them. It's also a potential reason why sharks may attack humans by accident, because they close their eyes when they get up close to something. A funny fact is when a shark is flipped upside down, it goes through tonic immobility. The stimulation on the shark's snout causes it to become disoriented and seem to be briefly paralyzed from intense fear. It's practiced by divers to prevent attacks and not actually harm the shark. But the purpose of it is to make mating rituals easier. Other animals can go through it, but sharks seem to be the most sensitive from it due to their strong electroreception. This is also a common response for humans when they're being sexually assaulted. Sharks don't just swim around to breathe. Most have to do it to stay buoyant. Most bony fish have a swim bladder to keep them neutral in the water. That's why they seem to float when they stay still, with tiny fins and a homocircle tail winding in an S-shaped pattern to move forward. So homocircle basically means a symmetrical tail. But since sharks don't have a swim bladder, they use larger fins to help glide like airplane wings. They have pelvic, anal, and dorsal fins that are mainly used for balance and stability. The pectoral fins actually provide the lift, and they have a heterocircle tail, which means that the longer fin is bigger on top, and it helps the head propel upward as the tail rotates down to provide lift. Some sharks have low-density lipid livers that contain squalene oil, which is lighter than water to help stay afloat. The oil is also how sharks have such a strong immune system, to make them rarely get sick. Sharks can, however, still get cancer, it's just much less likely. Their cartilaginous skeleton, which is lighter than bone, also helps keep them lightweight and afloat. Other sharks will try to gulp in air through their stomachs to act like a swim bladder. A swim bladder, however, isn't all that great because if the fish rapidly changes depth, the water pressure can cause the swim bladder to explode. So chew on that perspective, little fishies. For a shark to swim fast, their body must be as streamlined as possible. Longer fins are used for longevity while cruising, and short fins provide short bursts of torpedo speed. The caudal peduncle is condensed to enhance that speed and create the sharper turns. So peduncle is a thin area used for attachment on an organism like the stalk on a fruit, and caudal just means tail. This advantage of speed in movement means that sharks can make extreme migration patterns. The obligate ram ventilators move especially long distances in the open ocean. That's why many sharks don't do well in captivity, not just their size, but also because they're normally going several miles away every single day, and a tight space depresses their behavior to the point of starvation. Sharks will migrate for typical reasons such as temperature changes, mating spots, nurseries, food spots, and even returning to the place they were born, like what salmon do. If water stays warm with food remaining plentiful, then some reef sharks will have no need for migration and can stay where they are for their whole lives. Sometimes other fish will rub against the shark's sandpaper skin to rub off any parasites, and while cleaner wrasse help pick the dead skin and parasites off of sharks, the wrasse will get a meal, and it's called a symbiotic relationship. It's nice to show that sharks don't mindlessly attack fish that come near them. They'll even clean their teeth to make sure they stay healthy. Even that doesn't really matter when the teeth are always replaceable. Sharks can go through about 35,000 teeth in a lifetime, and since sharks have to eat tough foods, that usually makes the teeth fall off. And their jaws are designed like a conveyor belt full of teeth inside. And different teeth have different purposes, like how serrated sharp teeth are used like a saw to cut through tougher meat through seals and whales. Hooked needle-like teeth latch onto smaller prey to make sure they don't slip away, and flattened teeth are used to crush hard shells. It also helps that the upper jaw and lower jaw move and can be protruded, unlike us humans where only our lower jaw is able to move down. Sharks also have a tongue called the basiol, made from a cartilage rod, but it's practically useless since the papillae lining around the mouth and throat area is where the taste buds are located. And taste buds aren't really that big of a deal since sharks aren't really picky eaters and only need them to make sure they're swallowing something edible and not something like bones. Since their tongue barely functions, they have to shrug their shoulders to swallow instead, and only the cookie cutter shark uses the tongue to rip the flesh off of prey. So they're the only known species that actually uses the tongue. When looking at the rostrum, or nose, it makes the cartilage a softer and spongy feeling, similar to our human noses being made of cartilage, to allow the jaw to absorb the biting impact. The tessellated pattern on the cartilage in the mouth also helps cushion the impact. This makes them one of the most effective apex predators ever, and greatest jaws in terms of bite force. The megalodon shark currently has the strongest bite force in the animal kingdom with a whopping 40,000 psi. That's a lot. The lifespan and ages of sharks are fairly difficult to spot, so one likely way to tell the age of a shark is by counting the growth rings on the vertebrae. That means you can't really tell the age on the outside and would likely have to dissect it to see the cartilage to determine age, similar to trees. The average lifespan of a shark is about 20 to 30 years. However, the Greenland shark is remarkable for living up to 500 years, with the reason likely being them living in colder water, essentially slowing down their aging. Now let's get to the fun stuff with these animals. The sex. Most fish actually practice external fertilization via broadcast spawning, which is releasing eggs and sperm in the hopes they collide. Sharks, however, always use internal fertilization, like us humans, by using penetration. Male sharks have two penises called claspers, with them having two because they are essentially extensions from the two pelvic fins. The male inserts a clasper into the female's oviduct, with the process often being difficult. So usually the male will bite onto the female's pectoral fin to stay balanced, and sometimes males will flip the females over into tonic immobility to make insertion easier. Females will often have bite marks after sex, and so many females have evolved to have tougher skin than males for that very reason. Females also have two uteruses, with one of them usually not functional anyways. Sharks have 3 different methods of giving birth depending on the species. Oviparous is when the animal lays the eggs, and is common for smaller species like cat sharks and horn sharks. The mermaid's purse is the egg casing, and horn sharks will have their eggs in a sort of weird corkscrew shape. Viviparous is live birth, with a placental connection similar to what mammals have, and is common with ground sharks as they're the most recent sharks with the most complex type of reproduction. In the middle is ovoviviparous, or aplacental viviparous, with eggs hatching inside of the mother. They are then released in the form of live birth. It also allows the embryos to grow much bigger from a yolk sac to keep them nourished. Ovoviviparity, however, can get a little crazy, with some species using oophagy, which means the first hatcher will eat all of the eggs, and sand tigers go even more extreme by doing full-on intrauterine cannibalism, with 50 sharks eating each other until around 1 or 2 of them are actually born. Female sharks can often store sperm until the time is right depending on the season, or finding a safe place to hatch away from predators. Since sharks are fairly large apex predators, they unfortunately have a very slow reproductive rate, with about 1 year of gestation on average, and with high maturity ages of around 15 years on average, making it difficult to regulate the population. Their precise birth, however, does ensure that the few pups born are healthy, and most will likely make it to adulthood. There is also speculation that some sharks can use asexual reproduction as well, which is known as parthenogenesis. The process is still poorly understood and seems to only be observed in captivity with females. captive females will produce their own offspring as sort of an emergency if no male is present for too long. The baby gets identical genes to the mother, but the baby is unable to surpass diseases that the mother may have as there is no genetic diversity. So sharks and rays are the only fish with a deal known as the cloaca, which is a singular hole that is used for reproductive, urinary, and digestive tracts. Mammals have two different holes for digestion to separate the feces and urine. Sharks have unusually small intestine and have a spiral valve used to increase the surface area. Digestion is actually quite slow due to the J-shaped stomach inspecting if whatever is swallowed can proceed, and trying to get every bit of calories kept inside so they don't starve as quickly. Inedible items will then be regurgitated through vomiting, or in some cases turning the stomach inside out. The rest exits out of the cloaca as poop, but not as pee. Since sharks don't have a bladder nor swim bladder, urine actually leaves through the skin to help moisten the dermal denticles, and can help ward off predators from the smell. The urine is also used to release the shark's high concentration of urea to achieve osmotic balance with salt water. And bull sharks are special by peeing so much fresh water, about 20 times more than the average shark, and they are one of the only shark species that is able to survive freshwater as they maintain salt in their body. When doing my research, one of the most unusual facts I could find about sharks is some flexible juvenile species have a weird feeding method known as juvenile scale rasping, where a small shark stabs their dermal denticle tail onto prey and eats the tiny chunks off of the tail. This behavior was first documented in the small spotted cat and will likely get more information in the future. There was also a recent discovery from scalloped hammerheads that sharks are able to close off their gills, or in a way, hold their breath, for up to roughly 17 minutes when they dive down deeper to prevent the transfer of water pressure and maintain body temperature as deeper water becomes colder with higher pressure. Especially since most sharks are ectotherms or cold-blooded, meaning they use the surrounding area as their reference for body temperature, except lamniform sharks like great whites and basking sharks are endotherms or warm-blooded, meaning they can maintain their body temperature like us humans. Closing off the gills may also reduce the risk of catching a certain substance that has been invading the ocean. The ocean nowadays unfortunately has a lot of plastic, but sharks do surprisingly okay with plastic, at least compared to other marine animals. This is because of their stronger immune system and being able to eject inedible items, and having a muscle found in most fish known as myomeres. For sharks, they're folded in a W-shaped pattern to provide smooth and quick propulsions for locomotion. It's also the meat that is commonly consumed from humans, which leads to the biggest problem for sharks right now. Plastic killing comes nowhere near the amount of overfishing that is done on sharks. There are around less than 10 deaths of humans by sharks each year, while around 100 million sharks are killed each year by humans. A lot of it has to do with bycatch, but it also has to do with the delicacy of shark fin soup, a ridiculous meal that's expensive and is used to show the buyer is powerful and wealthy. The fins, however, provide very little flavor, and shark meat objectively does not taste good. What makes it more frustrating is people only cut off the fins, then throw the rest of the shark back into the water to be wasted. It's sneakily practiced in areas like China and Japan, and authorities are obviously avoidant to discuss it. The reason for consuming sharks is because of absurd beliefs that it will make people immune to diseases and makes them godlike, which is obviously untrue. It's tricky to figure out how to convince fishers to stop it because spreading awareness so far doesn't seem to be enough, and taking action can be very risky as people could get into a lot of trouble. So we'll have to see what the future brings to us, or what we can do for the future. This concludes the first episode of the series. Future episodes, I'll be breaking down each family of sharks, so feel free to subscribe to my channel, leave a like, and comment down below your thoughts on this video. Hit the notification bell so you get notified of when the next episode is released, and most importantly, share this video with your peers to educate them on the truth about sharks. Fin.